Okay, cool. And it says that the host disabled participant screen sharing, so it's not letting me share my screen.
Will you try one more time?
There we go. Oops. Is this large enough for everyone, or do you want me to zoom in more?
Maybe a little more.
How's that?
Better.
Okay, so in terms of the we call this like our application management system. From the end user perspective, there's kind of two main steps in the process. So the first step is what we call like the applicant registration form. And this is the process that this is kind of like step one, where the applicant goes through, can see just general information about the program, like how long the program will be open, who's eligible, all kind of like the program details. This is also where they accept kind of the terms and conditions of the program. So we have like an end user license agreement, privacy and cookies policy, as well as we do provide a program overview document. And so this has just more general information about the program details, as well as it provides instructions on how to apply. So it goes through pretty much the process I'm going to go through with you guys today, but just provides more information, screenshots. And then at the end, it also shows a list of all of the information that they'll need for the actual application. And so everything we have is offered in English and as well as Spanish. But yeah, so pretty much registration, first they accept terms and conditions, and then we do what we call like a kind of eligibility review. So this is by no means the extent of the review of the application, but the goal of this kind of portion is just to weed out any applicants that are clearly not eligible for the program. We want to make sure before they spend the time applying and filling out the whole application, gathering like all the documentation, that they're aware of really just the basic eligibility requirements, and make sure that they're not clearly ineligible for the program. So it'll ask some basic questions like, are you physically located in Somerville? Do you have a physical storefront, less than 20 employees? Did you open a new storefront on or after January 23, or leased a vacant space and intending to open a storefront in 24? Is your business currently operating in 5 or fewer locations? And is the business a chain or franchise? And so if you click kind of like the ineligible version of any of these, then you'll be thrown this message like, thank you for your interest. You're ineligible for this program. And then if they try to proceed to the next page, it'll kind of like lock them out. So assuming they meet all these eligibility requirements, then the next page is just asking for basic information. So here's where they would put in their first name, last name, and then email address. Any questions so far?
No questions. I was just letting you know I'm here. I was having technical issues with Zoom trying to get in, and I finally made it in, so I'm here.
Okay. Um,
Good job.
and so yes, then once they submit this form, then the next thing that happens is to whatever email they put in here, they're going to receive an email that looks very similar to this. So it'll say like, thank you for your interest. Please verify your email address to continue with the application process. And so this is just like a kind of extra step to make sure they have a valid email address, they have access to the email address that they put there, they didn't, make any typos or anything like that. And so you'll see that there's this thing at the bottom, please complete this form, with a link. So if you click on this verify email, it'll take you to a screen that looks like this. And here, all they need to do is click this verify email button. And then at that point, they've completed that first step of the registration process. So Once they verify their email, then the system will send them another email that looks like this. So it'll just say, like, thank you for your interest, your registration has been accepted. And then here are the instructions of how you can start the kind of next step, which we call the application intake process. And so this is where they're filling out like the actual application for the program, where they're uploading all their documentation, kind of like the whole typical process you think of when you think about filling out an application.
Looks like we have a question from Maria on the registration process. Maria?
Hi, thank you so much. I wanted to go back quite a few steps to the eligibility to ask some questions there. So for the second eligibility criteria, where it says that they must intend to open a new storefront in 2024, is there any deadline by which they will have to open that storefront? Like if they were to open that storefront on December 30th, 2024, would they still be eligible so long as they have already signed the lease on the vacant property?
Sure. So, and we can take some of these questions, and then like add them, have a document at the end to make sure that we're answering them fully. But due to the process of opening up a business, it's really hard sometimes to identify that exact open date. And so, pieces of this application will ask for verification that will basically, prove that you are intending on opening, but there could be kind of a slowdown in some part of the process. So because we can't really predict the future, if it's December 31st, it's kind of one of those things where we're trying to verify that you are intending to open up a new business in 2024, but there's not these like December 31st sort of cutoff, because again, it's really hard through some of the processes to get that confirmed date and to know that for sure as you're opening up your business. So the main thing is having that lease signed.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then the other question is the last eligibility criteria, where the business has to prioritize hiring local Somerville residents. How, when we talk about prioritizing, like, will there be a percentage, a quota that they must meet? How is that being evaluated? Is it just based on intention alone, or?
I think we will get to this kind of as we go through the application. You'll be able to see the way that we're checking. Some of this stuff is not asking for documentation. And so I think as we go through the application, you'll see like the response we ask for.
Thank you.
Any other questions regarding registration before we move on to the full app? Make sure I'm not missing anybody's hands. All right.
So yeah, so then once that registration piece is finished, you kind of click on this link to access the application. If you are helping someone fill out this application, you'll find that when they first try to open this link, it's going to ask them to like log in. Right now, I'm already logged in, which is kind of why I bypassed that. But in order to log in, you just put in the email address that you used for the registration process. And then based on whether that email address is like a Microsoft email address or something else, like a Gmail, AOL, anything like that, there'll be kind of like two pathways for logging in. Either you can just, if it is like a Microsoft account, you can just type in your normal Microsoft email password and it'll take you right to it. If it's like a Gmail account, for example, then what it'll do is it's going to send an email to your Gmail with like a one-time login code. And in this program overview and instructions document, this will help a lot if you have any questions with it or are getting confused, because this will walk you through step by step, like what the screens will look like and how to get in successfully. So then once you're logged in, yeah, just typical application. So we ask for general business information. So that would be the legal name of business, street address, mailing address if it's different, business start date, either your tax identification number, so either social security number if you're like a sole proprietorship, or EIN if you're an LLC or anything like that, the current number of full-time employees, and then we have a couple certifications. So the business has to certify that they are in fact a physical brick and mortar, that they are operating in 5 or fewer locations, and that they're not a chain or franchise.
Before we move on, I see Maria has her hand. I don't want us to go too far. Maria, it seems like you had a question about
I'm
the.
sorry.
No,
Yes, I'm probably going to be a
feel
pain in
free.
this call.
No,
Um,
these can help other people. So please feel free to answer any questions, ask any questions you have.
I just wanted to make sure that I understood the registration to application situation. Considering that in many cases, some of our staff is going to be providing support and going out there with an iPad, for example, and signing people up. So you first go through the registration stage. Is there anything that the applicant will have to do on their end in their email prior? Like, do they have to confirm anything in their email once they register? Or can we just register and then as soon as we complete the registration, we can immediately jump into the application itself with the applicant's email address? And I believe you said, you know, if it's Microsoft, then it's one way of accessing, and then if it's Google or something else, another way of accessing. I'm just trying to make sure that we're understanding how this is going to happen and if it can actually be done in someone else's device, or if the onus is actually going to be on the applicant to be doing this on their computer, for example, or their phone because they need to.
So to
Yeah.
answer to answer your question, they are going to have to verify the email address that they've signed up with. We've had other communities where there have been community partners who have helped residents do applications using a similar process. You're going to have access to that person's email address. So you can either do one of two things. We've had some community partners create brand new email addresses for individuals that they have access to, and they use that email to sign up for so that they can also get the notices related to that. Or we've had individuals who have given the person helping them their email address and password to get access to their email to go in and verify. But there is a verification of the email process that takes place prior to you being given access to the full application. So they are going to have to either give you access to their email, or while they're there with you, go in their email and click yes, to verify their email, and the link to that application is going to be in their email. So the easier way that most communities do is they just create a new email address for that individual that they can monitor as well with the permission of the applicant. And that way it's just easier. Everyone will have access to be able to get into that email. Now, keep in mind, you'll need a separate email for each individual applicant. So if you're helping 5 different applicants, you're going to have 5 separate emails that you create for those applicants. And you will have to use that email when you do the sign up, because you're going to have to verify that email address to then get access to that full application. Does that answer your question, Maria?
Yes, thank you.
Ariel, did I explain that correctly?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, perfect.
Any other questions about material so far?
And just for clarity, those with stars are mandatory fields, so they're going to have to put that information in there. And if they have any questions, obviously you all are going to be there as community partners to help them understand that. Most of these questions are very cut and dry and very clear. But if you have any questions regarding the questions that we ask, we'll be more than happy to answer those for you. But the important things are those certifications at the bottom. They have to certify that they have a brick and mortar storefront. They have to certify that the business is operating at 5 or fewer locations, and they have to certify that the business is not a chain or a franchise. So once they do that, we can move on to the next section, which appears to be the general business information and documents. So this is where they're going to upload their DBA certificate, any business permit or business license. So say, for instance, they're a beautician. Their business license would be their cosmetology license from the state, or if they're a barber, or whatever license that comes with their particular business would be acceptable. If they are a sole proprietor and they have a registered DBA on file for their business name, they would want to put that there as well. So any type of business permit, any business license, if they are a sole proprietor, they should have a Schedule C that shows their business on their tax return. They can upload a copy of the Schedule C from their 1040 tax returns, which documents the business and proves that, in fact, they have a business as a sole proprietor. They also have to sign and date a W-9. This is extremely important. This is how they get paid. So without that W-9, we cannot issue any payment to them. We want to make sure that W-9 is filled out correctly. If they are a sole proprietor, they're going to put their social security number on that W-9. If they are an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp or any of those, they can use their tax identification number, their EIN number from the IRS. So if there are any questions about what number they need to use on that form, if they're sole proprietor, it's the SOCH. Anybody else would be their tax ID number that's been assigned by the IRS. And then lastly, we want a picture of their storefront. We want to be able to verify that, in fact, they have a storefront. And if they do have a storefront, they should be able to snap a picture with their cell phone. Doesn't have to be a professional photo, just something that shows this is my storefront and this is where it's located. It very well may have signage. It may not have signage, but we just want to see, and hopefully it has the address in the picture so we can cross-verify that the address number on the building is what's also in the application. Are there any questions on this secondary set for uploads and pictures? Let me make sure I'm checking to make sure I don't see any hands. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself too when we ask for questions. All right, I think we're good on that. So we're going to move on to the next section. All right, so you've already moved on to the next page. Is this the next page area? Okay, great. So this page would be for authorized representatives. So it's say, for instance, you're a business owner, but you want to give someone else the authority to work on your application for you. This will also be, well, maybe the community partners are helping and they can be listed as authorized representatives. So if I'm working at a community partnership, I would be Kennedy Shannon would be the representative name. My business title could be representative, and then I would put my email information in there and my phone number. What this does is this lets our case managers know that you're authorized to talk about this application with them, and that the business owner has given you authorization to assist them in this process. So this can also be used if you have an older applicant who's not really tech savvy, but their grandchild is and knows how to do all this stuff. They can put them down as an authorized representative. So anyone that's going to help them with this process, we want them to put their information in this system to acknowledge that they are in fact an authorized representative. There's also a box that says, I acknowledge that if I am non-responsive to communications from case managers for 3 outreach attempts or 1 month, my application may be deemed ineligible for assistance or deactivated. We need individuals to follow up and respond back to us. We do have the 3 reach attempt or the 1 month period, and then we end with a phone call. So there'll be an email that goes out. Then there'll be another email that goes out. Then there'll be another email that goes out. Then there'll be a phone call. And if there's no contact after those outreaches, your application will be considered deactivated and you will be determined to be ineligible for assistance because we can't get in contact with you and we can't keep the program open indefinitely. We would move on to the next applicant and make a determination on their status. So we want individuals to understand that going in, that they need to be very responsive to any updates or any requests from case managers. And those requests will also go to the authorized representatives if they are listed in this application. Any questions about authorized representatives and what their roles are and how you put them in the application?
And I'll just add one thing, that the authorized representative, you see how like this box is grayed out. This is because this is going to default to whoever is like logged into the application. So whoever is going to be the authorized representative for that application, they need to be the one who's registering and signing in to complete the application. And we also have that here on the registration. We specify that this person is the one who should be registering.
So that's a good point. So if you are going to be assisting individual applicants, then you would probably want to put your email information and your contact for that applicant. when you register for that application. Obviously, you would be putting their information in the application, but you would be listed as the contact, because if you're going to be the person uploading things and doing the application on their behalf, you're going to be the person we call when we need a document, or if that W-9 is missing, or if that W-9 is incorrect, or if the picture is missing, we're going to contact you to say, hey, we need you to upload this document so we can get your application complete. Are there any questions regarding that?
I see Lindsay has her hand raised.
Yep, go ahead, Lindsay.
Yeah. So just to confirm, the notification will only go to one email address. That's correct.
So I guess it depends where in the process. When you're registering, like the verification of the email will just go to that one person. But anything after you submit the application, so like confirmation that the application's been submitted, like if you receive an email that like, yes, you've been awarded, or I'm sorry, you've been denied, all of those emails will go to the authorized representative, and the business owner will be CC'd on that email.
Okay, so you could potentially register with one email address and then have an authorized representative as another email address, and then it would go, all notifications would go to both. Is that correct?
So there's kind of like two roles in the system. There's the authorized representative and then the business owner. So the person who registers and the authorized representative always have to be the same. That's going to be the same person. Because when you register, then you sign into the application, like it's going to auto put in your email address of whoever registered as the authorized representative. But you can submit when you're in the application, you can submit a second person as the business owner if they're not the same person. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yes.
And then that way, when they send something to the authorized representative who is not the business owner will also be CC'd. So that way the business owner is never kept in the dark about what's happening with their application with their authorized representative. They're always CC'd as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So speaking of which, right, we go down to this, right? The authorized representative is the same. So in the situation where your authorized rep is the business owner, you would check that box. But in the situation we just discussed, where the authorized rep is going to be a community program, a community partner, that information would be different. So then you would put the business owner's name, their title, their email address and phone number in there. And then this creates that secondary contact point for those notifications that will in fact go out if they are not one and the same person. So you would hit next. So next, this is based on your lease. So we want to know your lease start date. So that they will get this from their lease agreement. We want to know the duration of their lease agreement. Is it a 12-month lease agreement? Is it a 24-month lease agreement? We want to put their monthly rental rate and then the total rent cost for 12 months, excluding utilities. So they would obviously multiply that monthly rental rate by 12. They certify, if awarded, that businesses will use the grant funding for reimbursement for past and impending rent payments. And then they also need to either upload, if we're giving them money for past rent payments, they're going to want to upload proof of that the rent has been paid. So those are going to be receipts. And if they're uploading, if we're paying future rent going forward, if they're asking for future rent going forward, they're going to have to upload a copy of that lease agreement to say, hey, this lease agreement is still good for the next 8 months. I'm asking for 8 months of assistance going forward. And this is the contractual document that binds me to make those 8 lease payments remaining on my lease, or 11 or 12, depending on when they apply and how long their lease agreements are. They would attach proof there where it says drag files here. And lastly, they need to certify that the business will retain a lease agreement for at least 1 year post-grant. We want to make sure that if we're paying rent for the businesses, that they're going to at least have a year. They're going to be at least there a year after we give them grant money. We don't want to give grant money for a lease and then 2 months later they move to a new location. We want to make sure that they're going to be there at least a year. Obviously things happen. Life happens. And that may not always be the case, but we want them to certify that they're going to try to remain in the facility for at least a year post our assistance. And they would check that box to certify that. Any questions on that top part regarding the lease and the rate and the rental support information? Please feel free to
Can I ask, Kennedy?
Yes.
and I don't know if this is a you question or a Kelly question, but obviously they certified that they're going to do their best, and I believe the word that you use is try to
Correct.
continue to operate. Is there, if their intention was to continue to operate for at least a year, but something happens, is there any consequence, or is there any fee? Do they have to give back any of the money? Like how does that piece work?
And Kelly, you can chime in, I think, because we discussed this. I think, we're not going to penalize someone for life happening. If there's a death in the family and they just can't continue to operate for some reason, or if a kid gets sick and, life happens, we're not going to hold that against anyone. But for the majority of people, we want to make sure that you have a financial plan in place to stay there for at least a year and that you're going to continue to operate, and you're not going to get this grant money and just kind of run, with it and say, okay, you paid and now we're gone. It's obviously meant to increase the presence of these businesses in these locations because it's the betterment of the community to have them there. So we obviously want them there as long as possible. So, we will understand issues of emergency and life. But absent that, and it's just a sole decision of, okay, I don't want to be there anymore, there may be consequences or there may be a request to return any funding. That will be the prerogative of the city and the grant agreement that the individual signed to say that if it can't be justified, we may ask for a portion of our grant funding back if you did not stay in that facility post 1 year post the grant. Does that make sense, Maria?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And it would just be important for us to understand what kind of evidence they would need to show. I know very top of mind, I have my mother going through a divorce and a pending very romantic vacation that was scheduled for Italy with her now soon to be ex-husband. And she can't get out of it because of the type of evidence that you must show that life happened. Right. And so these are the types of things that happen. And so what is the burden of proof that will fall on someone who may already be going through something pretty terrible and dire for them to be able to not be penalized?
I think
I
Rachel.
can take this question. So most likely we are not going to be we expect to be very accommodating in this. I think the federal government is also expecting us to be fairly accommodating in how we are devoting ARPA funds to this kind of purpose. This is really that fail safe for fraud, right? Somebody who comes in and says, taking your money, yes, I'm intending to open a nice new business in East Somerville, and then they walk away a month later and we say, the goal here was to facilitate the opening of businesses in our squares. And we want to see you open your business in Somerville and thrive here in Somerville. If you're taking your money and walking away to Florida, no.
Yep, I think that sums it up accurately. So we're definitely going to give people benefit of the doubt, but where there's clear and convincing evidence of fraud, then we will not. So, all right. Any other questions regarding that section? All right, moving down to your local employment and economy plan. Okay, so you're going to certify that if awarded, the business will prioritize hiring local Somerville, Massachusetts residents with a preference for low to moderate income individuals when possible and suitable. Again, this is just kind of like a promise to say, hey, if we're going to hire people, we're going to give some type of preference to a local hire, and we're going to try to find individuals who meet the low to moderate income requirements. We also want you to please describe how the business plans to prioritize hiring within Somerville. Do you plan on posting, do you give preference or individuals to local residents and they get interviewed first? Or are you going to keep the job posting open for local residents, for 2 weeks and then open it up to those that are not local or low income? Just give us a description of how you plan to prioritize that in your individual plan of hiring. Also, just tell us how your business contributes to the local community and the economy. If you have a restaurant, right? We feed the people of the community. We are located in such and such area. We contribute to the community by providing this vital service. And then if you have any additional documentation to support that, please feel free to upload it. It's optional. It's not a requirement to upload that documentation. But if it will help us understand, then by all means, please feel free to upload a document, and you would put that under the additional supporting documentation there where it says optional. Next, we go to priority points. So this is extremely important. So we are prioritizing certain applicants to get a first bite at the apple of the funding. So how this program is going to work, it's going to be open for a period of 30 days. There are going to be applicants that apply during that period, and then it's going to close. And at that point, we're going to go through applications and we're going to prioritize applications. And each of these questions represents a priority point. And depending on the number of points you get, we'll start with those applications that get 6 points, then those that get 5 points, then 4 points, then 3, then 2, then 1, then no preference. And then we go into the general applications and we will process it that way until the funding is exhausted. So the first one is, has the business received funding from the city or state previously? So if you've received funding from Somerville in any type of grant or from the state, and you click yes, please describe the funding amount and what entity program granted you the funds. If it's something unrelated as a small business, you can put that. This would not be PPP. So the PPP came from the federal government, so a business wouldn't have to put PPP. But if it got some type of funding from the state level or the city level for their small business, we want to know about it. Secondly, is the business opening the storefront as a result of displacement due to an act of God or extreme rental increases since April 2020? So were you in a place and the rent was just astronomical, like your landlord went up on the rent twofold and now you had to move and relocate? If that's the case, we want to know that. Were you involved? Were you in a place where it flooded, and there was a place that flooded out your storefront and you had to move as it relates to that? It was an act of God. It wasn't something that you done. You would have loved to have continued to stay there, but due to either super increased rents or damage to the structure or the property that you're releasing, it just was not available for you. We want to know that, and we want you to provide some proof. Where it says please provide proof, it can just be a written document to say this is what happened. In October of 2020, I was in a building and it burned down, and I couldn't lease there anymore because the building is no longer effective, and so now I have to open up my storefront somewhere else. And as a result, I've been displaced. So just having a document, a Word document that describes that displacement or that act of God would be sufficient for that particular category. Next would be, is the business owned by one of the following groups? And you can collect multiple groups. Now, they will only get 1 point for if they check this box, but they can check multiple boxes. So if you're a woman of color, you would pick, I'm a woman and I'm BIPOC. If you're the woman veteran of color, you would check, I'm a woman veteran BIPOC. So you could click all the boxes that apply to you, and any box selected in this category will result in 1 point. Maria, I see your hand raised. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to clarify for folks who may not be familiar with PPP, that was the Paycheck Protection Program, which was
Yes.
money that was dispersed through the federal government to support during COVID, for businesses that were really badly hit by COVID. So just something important as we're going through it. We try as best to steer away from I don't even know the word anymore. Acronyms. Just because we're going to be also training some other folks to do this so that we are all on the same page.
Nope, that makes sense. Absolutely. I'm glad you gave clarity on that. All right. The next, does the business have fewer than 5 full-time employees? So obviously we want to focus those that are legitimately like really small businesses. They will get a priority point because they are a legitimate small business or a really small business. So small business may be 20 employees, but if you've got less than 5, we want to know about it because you're going to get a priority point for that. And lastly, is the business owner a Somerville resident? So what that means is the person who owns the business, do they live in Somerville? We want to give a priority point for those individuals who not only have their business in Somerville, but also live in Somerville and they're a member of the community. And as a result, they get a priority point for that. So proof of residency would be a lease, a utility bill, a bank statement, and obviously the content of the bank statements can be blacked out. We just want to check that address and that the name is on there. Any type of tax bill, so any type of thing in the business owner's name that has that local Somerville address on there, we want to be able to know that so we can give them that priority point when it comes to funding. Are there any additional questions on any of the other categories of priority funding? Perfect. So hearing none, we'll go to the next screen.
I'm not sure, Kennedy, if you just want to also elaborate on the qualified census tract, that's another priority point, but that the case managers will verify
Yes,
that.
I'm glad you said that. So yes, if the business is located in a qualified census tract, that is okay, we see 5 on here. That's the 6th priority point. That priority point will be determined by the case manager, by the case managers internally. So where a business is located, there are qualified census tracts. These are census tracts that the federal government has determined to be those that were disproportionately impacted by COVID. And it's determined based on census data and income data. So most of the people who live on a qualified census tract is considered to be low to moderate income. So if your business is located within that qualified census tract, you automatically get 1 priority point, and that will be determined on the back end by the case managers when they put your address into the tool from HUD. It will say, yes, this is in a qualified census tract, or no, it is not in a qualified census tract. If it is, then you will get 1 additional priority point, and that makes the 6 points, 6 possible points that you're able to get. Thanks for pointing that out, Ariel. So last but not least is the acknowledgements and consents. So this is the final part of the application. You are going to be submitting this application and you're going to be acknowledging that the funding under this program is limited. So by submitting an application, you are in no way entitled to funding. It is not guaranteed. Funding is based on availability and based on eligibility. Also, that the information that you're providing in this application is true to the best of your knowledge, and that you understand submitting false or fraudulent information may result in being deemed ineligible, and will also result in potential criminal liability if in fact it's referred. That you authorize the city of Somerville and its designees to share information provided herein with third parties to the extent necessary to determine eligibility for the program or to carry out the program's activities. That you are authorized to make these representations for the entity contemplated in the application up to and including entering into any legally binding agreements, because there is going to be a grant agreement that's going to have to be signed. You also acknowledge that if you receive funding from this program, that you are required to sign a grant agreement. You understand that no funding will be released until a signed grant agreement is provided. Additionally, if an audit or other examination by the city or another entity determines that such funds were either not spent improperly spent by the grantee, or the grantee shall be responsible for repaying any or all unused or improperly spent funds from the city of Somerville within 30 days of receipt of the notice. So if we find out that we've given a business money for rent, and for some reason it reports to us, no, they went out and bought a new Lexus, and it can be documented that they took this money and bought a Lexus or something like that, something that's just completely improper with the use of these funds. Obviously, because they're federal funds, there is a right of recoupment, and we just want to make people aware of that. You will type your name, and you will put the day's date, and you would check the box that by typing your name, it is considered a handwritten signature for the purposes of this application. And then you would hit submit. So once the application is submitted, the case managers will do our due diligence. We will review all the documentation that's been submitted. If there is additional documentation, I see a question here. Do we plan to ensure that the grant agreements are in plain languages? Additionally, will iParametrics and preferred language agree to? Yes. So, Ariel, as far as the languages that the grant agreements come in, I think it's English and Spanish.
The grant agreement will just be in English.
Oh, the grant agreement will just be in English. Okay, so we can do. That's a good question.
I think this one is also probably with our law department, Maria Teresa,
Yeah.
that this we may not be able to get out of the legalese.
And
Uh-huh.
there's a midway point. I know that we've been able to push them a bit. There's some legal terminology that has to remain because of protections, but there's a lot of other things in the way that things are worded that we have been able to push for changes on in other realms. And we'd be happy to support you on the push.
I think ours is pretty
Yeah.
plain language for the most part. Are you trying to find it, Ariel?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull it
Yeah.
up right now.
Yeah, I think our grant agreement is pretty plain. We try to draft them in plain language. They're not as legally as some of the other documents are.
Okay.
So,
And then the other concern would be, yeah, the preferred language. I would not be comfortable with an interpreter having to go through that, particularly if we're doing it through on-demand interpretation, rather than another interpreter. And also just because the grantees, this is something that they're going to keep for their files. So it is a legally binding document that they should be able to fully understand and grasp in their language. So I wonder about the language access plan for that.
so we can look at potentially doing one in Spanish.
I think this is one we can discuss, and we'll make sure we have a plan, Maria Teresa,
Okay.
and we'll make sure that we share that plan with you.
Perfect.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
So as far as the grant agreement is concerned, it's pretty simple. It's not super, I think it's what's it, 2 pages? Can you scroll down? Yeah, it's 2 pages. So, and then obviously there's some additional documents that Somerville requires that are also attached to that that will have to get signatures. That's kind of beyond our control. That's a Somerville legal requirement that they're requiring. And so, but for the general basis of the grant agreement, it is extremely limited and short and sweet and to the point. It just says, hey, you're getting these grant dollars. This is how much you're getting. This is what you need to use it for, and you agree to those terms and conditions for the most part. Any other questions regarding the grant agreement? So the other part, so once we get a signed grant, say for instance, you get an application, they're approved. We get a signed grant agreement. The last part will be verification of identity. And what that will be is that will be a 5-minute Microsoft Team meeting that will be set up by the case manager, in which the applicant will have to be on camera and they will have to show their identification card and their face. We want to make sure that who we're cutting these checks to are the people who are intended to receive these funds, and that there's no one fraudulently pretending to be a business owner on the other end of this computer and who has gotten someone's information and has submitted an application. So we want to verify that the person who's the business owner is actually going to be on the other end of that computer. So we do so with a really quick 5-minute Teams phone call. They show their face, we say hi, we introduce ourselves, they show us a picture of their identification card, which obviously should match what they look like on their face, and then we verify that they're who they say they are, and that's the last step. And then we will process payment for the grant. If there are any issues prior to that, again, case managers will inform individuals of what they're missing, any documentation that they may be missing. If there's any documentation that comes through fuzzy or we're unable to read it, we will definitely reach out. There is an email address and a phone number that will be manned. What we tend to do is we tend to take phone calls 3 days a week. And 2 days a week, we don't take phone calls because we're working cases. And if we took phone calls all the time, we would never have time to work cases. So, but there is a requirement that we will return the call back. So, so okay, on this one, they're taking phone calls on Tuesdays through Thursdays from 9 to 5. So Mondays and Fridays are going to be case days. So those are days that we're working cases specifically. We're going through, adding documentation that may or may have come through, reaching out via email to individuals, but we are available Tuesday through Thursday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. to answer any of your questions. And that includes eligibility questions. That includes tech support questions with the application. If for some reason you can't get something to load or you're getting an error message, please feel free to call that number or send a support request through that email address, and we'll be more than happy to assist you or answer any of your questions. That being said, I think that pretty much sums up the application process and the website. Are there any additional questions about anything that we've covered today or anything that we haven't covered today that you would like to ask and address? Please feel free to unmute yourself. Perfect. Hearing none, I think we're good. So we're super
So
excited to get this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry, no, I had a question that I had put in the chat about the language capacity of case managers as well as the voicemail recording, whether it was available in other languages.
So we do have case managers that are bilingual and they do English and Spanish. So if we run into a situation where we have a Spanish-speaking applicant, we can refer them to a Spanish-speaking case manager. I believe that the voicemail, I'm not sure if the voicemail is first in English and then in Spanish. I think it goes through both. I think it first starts off in English and then it goes in Spanish, if I'm not mistaken.
What about other languages? We have a lot of Portuguese speaking businesses, Haitian Creole speaking businesses, Nepali speaking businesses. So I'm particularly, and a lot of them are small businesses. So there are folks that are, that could potentially benefit from this. So what would the language, would there be a possibility for them to access a case manager?
They can get a case manager, but I'm not sure if they would get a case manager that speaks their language. We don't have any case managers that speak all of those languages. I'll get with Kelly on this about any type of interpretation services that may need to be instituted as a result of that. That's definitely something that we can work with them to make available.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and
Kennedy.
Teresa, we're going to be working just to close the loop on that. Meredith is going to set us up with that training for this week so that our whole team is trained on the on-demand service. So if we get somebody who doesn't speak economic development can help.
Awesome. Perfect. Any other questions?
Yes, I have one question that came out. If the business owners the businesses that get awarded for the amounts, do they have to declare that on their tax returns, or is that something that it's
So the guidance that we've received from the IRS is that it is considered income and that it does need to be reported as such. Now, if you have a particular certain type of situation with your taxes in which it would not be considered income, then everybody's tax situation is different. But you will receive a 1099 for those funds. So you treat that 1099 according to whatever your individual, financial situation is, but you will receive a 1099 document for that funding.
Thank you.
Any
Are there
additional
any-
questions?
I was about to ask the same thing if there are any other questions. If not, I put the email for and the phone number for questions in the chat, and then we will have the recording. I'm going to try to get it uploaded to the website with the application link. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Um,
Bye, everyone.